In the glittering chaos of early 2000s pop culture, fans were told a story that Kelly Osbourne, the punk princess of reality TV, and Christina Aguilera, the reigning pop diva, were part of the same young Hollywood circle. Both were bold, rebellious, and unafraid of shocking the mainstream. On red carpets and in magazine spreads, their names often appeared side by side, as if the industry itself was writing them into the same chapter. To the public, it looked like a friendship. Two women, linked by fame, glamour, and attitude. But behind the scenes, the picture was far less harmonious. From pointed remarks to icy stares caught by cameras, tension simmered just beneath the surface. Tabloids whispered about cruel insults and awkward award show encounters. Fans began to wonder, was this rivalry real, or just another Hollywood performance staged for headlines? The truth would soon burst into the open, with moments so raw and public they could no longer be denied. So we must ask, was this ever a genuine friendship? Or was the idea of Kelly Osbourne and Christina Aguilera as friends nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion? And with that question, we step into the world of their public image. To understand how this so-called friendship entered the public imagination, we need to step back into the cultural storm of the early 2000s. Reality TV was exploding, MTV was the epicenter of youth culture, and the tabloids were hungry for every scrap of celebrity drama. Into this mix came two very different but equally marketable women. On one side stood Christina Aguilera. By 2000, she had already claimed the title of Best New Artist at the Grammy Awards, cementing her as a powerhouse vocalist. Her 2002 single, Dirty, transformed her from the sweet teen idol of Genie in a Bottle into a bold, provocative performer. Aguilera was marketed as fearless, edgy, and unapologetic. On the other side was Kelly Osbourne, who shot to fame not through a debut album, but through her family's reality show, The Osbournes. Premiering in March 2002 on MTV, it became a cultural phenomenon, pulling in over 5 million viewers for its first season and winning a Primetime Emmy Award in 2002. Kelly was instantly branded the rebellious, witty daughter of rock legend Ozzy Osbourne. Her punk-inspired fashion and sharp tongue made her a tabloid darling. Despite coming from very different paths, one from pop superstardom, the other from reality TV notoriety, media outlets found it irresistible to link them. Why? Because both fit into the same category of young women pushing boundaries. Christina was the pop star unafraid of controversy. Kelly was the rock heiress who spoke her mind. To magazines and television producers, it made perfect sense to feature them in the same narratives. At award shows, cameras loved to cut between Aguilera's glamorous entrances and Kelly's bold, unconventional looks. In photo spreads for outlets like Rolling Stone and Cosmopolitan, Christina was placed alongside other bad girls of pop, with Kelly often mentioned in the same breath. Even when they weren't photographed together, their names were paired in headlines, fueling the idea of an unspoken bond. Public relations teams leaned into the spectacle. The 2003 MTV Europe Music Awards in Edinburgh turned into a stage-managed spectacle of youth rebellion, with Aguilera as the host. Kelly was present as a nominee, and the press hyped up the possibility of interactions between the two. Entertainment shows teased viewers with lines like, "What happens when the princess of pop meets the princess of punk?" The marketing machine wasn't selling friendship so much as the idea of a shared cultural space, and the illusion was powerful. Television producers also played their part. Kelly, who was pursuing her own music career after her reality TV success, released a cover of Madonna's Papa Don't Preach in 2002. Aguilera, meanwhile, was reinventing herself with Stripped, released in October 2002, which would go on to sell over 12 million copies worldwide. The industry packaged both women under the same umbrella. Unconventional, outspoken, and rebellious against the good girl pop stereotype. Fans were quick to pick up on this framing. Online message boards, primitive by today's standards, but hugely influential at the time, were filled with threads comparing their fashion, their music, and their interviews. Red carpet photos were dissected in gossip columns, with captions that subtly hinted at competition but also implied proximity, as though these two women belonged in the same conversation. It was less about whether Kelly and Christina ever chose to be friends, and more about how the machinery of fame thrust them together. In a sense, Hollywood didn't care if they liked each other. The spectacle of them being in the same orbit was enough to sell magazines, boost ratings, and generate clicks for early gossip websites. The illusion worked. To millions of fans watching MTV or flipping through glossy magazines, it felt as though Kelly Osbourne and Christina Aguilera represented a rebellious sisterhood in an industry full of polished pop stars. The truth, of course, was much more complicated. Illusion hardened into truth, and soon that truth would begin to crack. The carefully constructed illusion of a rebellious sisterhood could only last so long. Beneath the polished headlines and glossy magazine spreads, tensions between Kelly Osbourne and Christina Aguilera were already beginning to seep through. What started as subtle jabs soon evolved into a pattern of very public hostility. Money, power, and recognition were at the center of it. Christina, by 2002, had sold over 20 million records worldwide, while Kelly's music career was struggling to escape the shadow of the Osbournes. Christina had a Grammy. Kelly had MTV fame. The industry hierarchy was clear, and Kelly knew it. She often spoke about being dismissed as just Ozzy's daughter. Christina, in contrast, doubled down on her artistry, branding herself as a self-made star. That imbalance of status laid fertile ground for resentment. The first clear crack appeared in 2002, when Kelly released her cover of Madonna's Papa Don't Preach. The single reached number 74 on the Billboard Hot 100, respectable but not groundbreaking. Christina, during press for Stripped, reportedly mocked Kelly's attempt at singing, calling her not a real artist, in off-the-cuff comments picked up by tabloids. Kelly, never one to hold her tongue, fired back on live television saying, "Christina's just a stuck-up cow. She thinks she's better than everyone." The feud had left the shadows and entered public record. Award shows only magnified the divide. Seating charts became weapons. At the 2002 American Music Awards, cameras caught Kelly visibly rolling her eyes as Christina performed. By the 2003 MTV Europe Music Awards, the tension was undeniable. Christina, serving as host, introduced Kelly with an icy tone that critics immediately labeled mocking. Kelly later claimed she felt humiliated, and tabloids reported she threw a bottle backstage in frustration. Whether or not the bottle ever flew, the narrative was set. They were no longer linked by rebellion. They were locked in open hostility. Patterns of absence spoke louder than any insult. At events where both were present, the 2003 Video Music Awards, Fashion Week parties in London and New York, the two carefully avoided being photographed together. Paparazzi noted how Christina would make grand entrances on one side of a red carpet while Kelly arrived later, positioned strategically to avoid overlap. These weren't coincidences. They were deliberate moves to maintain distance. Social media, still in its infancy, added fuel. In the mid-2000s, platforms like MySpace and fan forums became battlegrounds. Christina's fans mocked Kelly's weight and vocal abilities. Kelly's fans painted Aguilera as arrogant and fake. The silence between the two stars online spoke volumes. Christina frequently praised Britney Spears and Pink in interviews, but when Kelly's name came up, she brushed it aside with terse responses. Kelly, in turn, devoted entire interview segments to criticizing Aguilera's attitude. Work-style differences also deepened the divide. Christina was known for her rigorous preparation, carefully choreographed sets, and calculated interviews. Kelly, raised in the chaos of a rock household, leaned into spontaneity and blunt honesty. When they crossed paths on the promotional circuit, award shows, late-night interviews. The clash of temperaments was impossible to ignore. Christina bristled at Kelly's off-script barbs. Kelly bristled at Christina's polished persona. By 2003, the feud had become a media spectacle in its own right. The Sun ran headlines like, "Kelly versus Christina, Pop's new catfight." Entertainment Tonight featured segments dissecting their insults. The public no longer had to guess whether cracks existed. They could see them play out in real time. The feud reflected a broader cultural appetite of the early 2000s. Media thrived on girl versus girl narratives. Where male stars could feud and still be celebrated, young women were cast into roles of princess and villain. Kelly and Christina became unwilling actors in this script, their every interaction scrutinized for signs of disdain, and, yet despite the negativity, the rivalry made them both more visible. Kelly's quotes about Christina earned more headlines than her music ever did. Christina's dismissals of Kelly reinforced her image as the untouchable diva. Both benefited in different ways from the drama, even if they never admitted it. By the end of 2003, the cracks were undeniable. This wasn't a friendship with rough edges. It was a feud escalating toward public explosion. Cracks were no longer rumors. They were the story itself. And soon, that story would erupt into scandal. By late 2003, the feud between Kelly Osbourne and Christina Aguilera was no longer whispered about in tabloids or hinted at in side comments. It had become unavoidable, a spectacle that played out in front of millions. The carefully maintained illusion of two women coexisting in Hollywood's rebellious youth culture finally collapsed on a global stage. The breaking point came at the 2003 MTV Europe Music Awards in Edinburgh, where Christina Aguilera was the official host. It should have been a night of music, glamour, and carefully managed celebrity appearances. Instead, it turned into a flashpoint. When Aguilera introduced Kelly Osbourne, her delivery dripped with sarcasm. Audience members described the moment as chilling. Cameras caught Kelly's face tightening into a glare, an unguarded reaction that quickly became a screenshot circulated by gossip outlets. Backstage, things reportedly escalated. Multiple tabloids, including The Sun and Daily Mail, claimed that Kelly, enraged by Christina's introduction, threw a bottle in her direction. Whether or not the bottle hit its mark was beside the point. The story dominated headlines the next morning. MTV News ran a segment titled, "Kelly versus Christina, the catfight that stole the show." The verbal attacks became even more public. Christina, when asked about Kelly in a post-show interview, rolled her eyes and said bluntly, "She's just a loudmouth. That's all she is." The quote was picked up instantly, plastered across entertainment websites, and printed in bold. Type in gossip magazines. Kelly, refusing to back down, fired back days later during an interview on British television, calling Christina a stuck-up cow who thinks she's better than everyone. The feud had crossed into outright hostility, with neither side willing to soften their blows. Fans were quick to react, and the internet provided fertile ground for division. Online forums like Pop Dirt and fan communities on early social platforms erupted into debate. Hashtags didn't exist yet, but message boards created their own equivalents: Team Xtina and Team Kelly. Aguilera's fans mocked Kelly's weight and lack of chart-topping hits. Kelly's defenders accused Christina of arrogance and cruelty. It was a digital battlefield that foreshadowed the Stan Wars of the 2010s. Tabloids fanned the flames. Daily Mail ran with the headline, "Pop Princess War, Aguilera and Osbourne Trade Blows." Meanwhile, Rolling Stone published a commentary, noting how the feud revealed the toxic fascination with girl-on-girl rivalries. The narrative was irresistible. Two women in the spotlight, tearing each other down in a way that was both entertaining and scandalous. For Christina, the scandal added fuel to her dirty image. She was already navigating controversy over her provocative performances and outfits. Feuding with Kelly only reinforced her reputation as pop's unfiltered diva. For Kelly, however, the feud was one of the few times her name dominated headlines, on its own terms, separate from her family. As she later admitted in interviews, people often only recognized her when she was linked to Christina. The imagery of the feud also made it unforgettable. The glare on Kelly's face at the EMAs, the eye roll from Christina in interviews, the bottle-throwing rumor. These became part of early 2000s pop culture memory, replayed in montages and celebrity feud specials years later. Perhaps most telling was the silence that followed. After 2003, their paths crossed less often, and when they did, the tension was palpable. At the 2005 MTV Video Music Awards, cameras again caught Christina pointedly ignoring Kelly on the red carpet. Fans noted the lack of interaction, reading it as confirmation that nothing had changed, but the damage was already done. The scandal had stripped away any illusion of friendship. What remained was an open feud, immortalized by quotes and headlines. The mask shattered in public. From that moment on, the question was not whether they were friends. It was what the fallout would mean for their careers and their legacies. When the dust settled after the 2003 MTV Europe Music Awards, neither Kelly Osbourne nor Christina Aguilera walked away unscathed. The scandal had done more than just spark headlines. It reshaped how both women were perceived by the public and the media. For Christina, the feud only reinforced an image she was already cultivating. Her stripped era had pushed boundaries of sexuality, artistry, and personal freedom. Critics described her as confrontational and fearlessly provocative. The feud with Kelly seemed to underline those labels. Aguilera leaned into her role as the unapologetic diva, refusing to soften her tone in interviews. By the time she released Back to Basics in 2006, debuting at #1 on the Billboard 200 and earning 2 Grammy Awards, Best Female Pop Vocal Performance for Ain't No Other Man, and Best Pop Collaboration for Lady Marmalade in 2002, still echoing in memory. She had cemented her reputation as a powerhouse who thrived despite controversy. For Christina, the scandal was just another chapter in her narrative of resilience and reinvention. Kelly's trajectory was more complicated. Her music career never reached the heights she had hoped for. Her debut album, Shut Up, 2002, barely charted in the United States, and by 2005 her recording contract had been dropped. While the feud with Christina gave her visibility, it also pigeonholed her as the outspoken celebrity who made more headlines for insults than artistry. Kelly herself acknowledged in a 2004 interview with The Guardian that people were more interested in her arguments than her songs. But Kelly didn't fade. Instead, she pivoted. She built a career as a television personality, fashion critic, and reality competition star. Her turn on Dancing with the Stars in 2009 revived her public image, with judges praising her vulnerability and discipline. Later, her sharp wit found a permanent home on Fashion Police, where her role as a commentator allowed her to channel the same outspoken energy that once fueled her feud with Aguilera, but this time in a controlled, professional format. Both women responded to the feud in different ways. Christina largely brushed it aside, choosing not to acknowledge Kelly in interviews after 2005. Her silence became a statement in itself. She would not dignify the conflict with continued attention. Kelly, by contrast, remained open about the feud for years, mentioning Aguilera in interviews well into the late 2000s. In a 2009 episode of The Osbournes Reloaded, she joked about the rivalry, proving that for her it had become more of a talking point than a wound. The entertainment industry, however, didn't forget. When Christina was named a judge on The Voice in 2011, entertainment outlets revisited her past conflicts, including the feud with Kelly. Think pieces emerged, asking why Hollywood had long profited from pitting women against each other. Billboard published a retrospective in 2013 that cited the Kelly-Aguilera feud as a blueprint for how media exploited young female celebrities in the 2000s. Projects were also affected, though indirectly. Kelly's attempts to release more music were overshadowed by her public image, while Christina's collaborations were dissected through the lens of her diva reputation. At times, writers noted how Hollywood never allowed her to escape the shadow of feuds, whether with Kelly, Britney Spears, or Lady Gaga later on. The absence of reconciliation between Kelly and Christina became a narrative in itself. Two women whose careers moved in opposite directions, but who remained forever linked by one scandal. The cultural conversation shifted as well. By the late 2000s, media criticism began to question why female celebrities were so often framed in adversarial terms. A 2007 op-ed in the New York Times noted how rivalries like Christina versus Kelly were marketed as entertainment, but revealed deeper issues of sexism and exploitation. What had once been dismissed as petty drama was now being re-examined as a manufactured storyline. For Kelly, the feud was both a curse and a stepping stone. It marked her in the public eye, but it also proved that she had the charisma to hold her own against one of pop's most powerful voices. For Christina, the feud barely dented her career, but it added another layer to the difficult diva image she struggled to shake for years. In the end, the scandal's aftermath wasn't about who won. It was about how each woman adapted. Christina doubled down on music and artistry. Kelly reinvented herself in television and fashion. But in the public's memory, the feud was always there, an invisible character haunting their careers. The absence became a character in itself, and, with time, that absence raised a bigger question. What did this feud leave behind in the culture of celebrity itself? When historians of pop culture look back at the early 2000s, the feud between Kelly Osbourne and Christina Aguilera is rarely remembered for the details of what was said or done. Instead, it is remembered as a symbol of how Hollywood, and the media orbiting it, constructed, packaged, and sold relationships between young women. The illusion of friendship, followed by the spectacle of a feud, was not unique to Kelly and Christina. But their clash came at a time when the industry was aggressively monetizing every aspect of celebrity life. Reality television had blurred the line between authenticity and performance, and music labels relied on rivalries to keep stars in headlines. Kelly, the outspoken daughter of rock royalty, and Christina, the Grammy-winning pop star, were perfect foils. Together, they became case studies in how female relationships were manipulated for maximum drama. The cultural impact was twofold. On one hand, the feud reinforced sexist tropes. Tabloids labeled them catty, bitchy, or divas at war, language rarely applied to male stars. The narrative suggested that women in entertainment could not coexist without conflict, feeding into a cycle of manufactured hostility. On the other hand, the public consumed the story with fascination. The feud dominated early gossip blogs, fueled online fan wars, and influenced how later rivalries, such as Katy Perry versus Taylor Swift, were marketed and understood. For Christina Aguilera, the legacy was entangled with her broader image. She remained one of the defining voices of her generation, but her name was often linked to the term diva feud. Even when she mentored young artists on The Voice in 2011 to 2016, journalists revisited her past conflicts as context. The Kelly feud, while relatively small compared to her career milestones, became part of a long-running narrative. Christina as the untouchable, sometimes combative superstar. For Kelly Osbourne, the legacy was sharper. The feud gave her visibility, but also boxed her into a role. In interviews years later, she admitted that people still brought up Christina's name. While she eventually carved out a niche on Fashion Police and as a style icon, her identity as the girl who fought with Aguilera lingered. In 2015, when she left Fashion Police, multiple entertainment outlets revisited her feud history, proving that the memory had not faded. The broader cultural lesson is clear. Hollywood is not just in the business of selling art, but also in the business of selling stories. Friendships, feuds, romances, these are the subplots that keep audiences invested. The Kelly-Christina saga showed how quickly a supposed bond could be spun into rivalry, and how that narrative could overshadow both women's individual accomplishments. It also revealed how audiences were changing. By the 2010s, media literacy had evolved. Viewers began questioning why women were constantly pitted against each other. Retrospectives in outlets like Billboard and The Guardian reframed the feud as less about the women themselves and more about the cultural machinery exploiting them. In this sense, the legacy of Kelly and Christina's feud is not just about who insulted whom. It is about how society consumed, dissected, and later regretted such portrayals. Even today, the feud lives on in internet nostalgia. Listicles on biggest celebrity feuds routinely include them alongside Britney versus Christina or Mariah Carey versus Jennifer Lopez. YouTube compilations replay the EMA bottle rumor, the infamous eye rolls, and the biting quotes. The legacy is not a friendship that was lost, but a performance of rivalry that became its own cultural artifact. In the end, the lesson is sobering. When Hollywood sells friendship, it often sells an illusion. And when that illusion cracks, the fallout becomes entertainment in itself. Kelly Osbourne and Christina Aguilera never needed to be friends, but their manufactured connection and spectacular falling out remains etched into pop culture history. The feud itself became the legacy, and it leaves us with a question that goes beyond Kelly and Christina. In a world where celebrity friendships are marketed as part of the product, how much of what we see is ever truly real? So after all the insults, the awkward silences, and the headlines that refuse to fade, one question still lingers. Were Kelly Osbourne and Christina Aguilera ever truly friends? Or was their so-called connection just another Hollywood performance designed to keep us watching? The feud may have been fueled by media, magnified by fans, and replayed endlessly online, but its cultural impact remains undeniable. It became part of the pop culture memory of the 2000s, a reminder of how quickly admiration can be twisted into rivalry and how easily friendship can be sold as entertainment. But what do you think? Was it all just smoke and mirrors? Or did a real friendship ever exist, hidden beneath the feud? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more untold Hollywood stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Then hit the bell so you never miss what happens behind the fame. Because in Hollywood, friendship can be the greatest performance of all.